Much is known about the civil rights movement in Derry, but less is known about how it started and the people who pioneered the movement. This episode tells the story of Dermie McClenaghan, why he became involved in the civil rights movement, and how his home in Wellington Street became the hub for the movement in Derry.
Well, 7 Wellington Street is where I was brought up. Wellington Street was a working class street, beside where Free Derry Corner is now, and it was a homely street. The sort of social environment in the Bogside at that time was nationalist, as you would have expected. But even as a child, you would have known that there was something stolen from the community. There was something wrong with it, you know. And as you get a bit older, you started to understand it a bit more, you know. And of course, the democracy was stolen from us because of discrimination in jobs and housing and voting. People who owned property had more votes than people who didn't own property.
For many Bogside residents at the time, housing conditions were poor and the area was in disrepair.
The house in Wellington Street where we lived was damp. It was really unlivable, but if you touched the wallpaper, you got an electric shock. The house was in shocking condition. There was rats there too, you know, sort of onto the stairs. I'm sure there was no difference from that house that we were in and any other house in the street, you know. But I don't remember ever sort of complaining that much about it, you know, but I do remember we were on the housing list like everyone else for years, 14, 15, 16 years or something.
With no new houses being built, many families were living in unsafe and neglected conditions.
Looking back now, you know, I think that, you know, given the circumstances, I think people of that area, like my mum and my dad, they coped very well and they did their best, but there was always the worry about my father's health. It was like a stone in your shoe and a moving shoe, you know. You know, it wasn't the end. You worried about him all the time on his work because he was very, very ill. He had bronchitis, TB, which really, in a sense, he shouldn't have been working at all. And then the time came when he was in and out of hospital. And my mother looked after him so well, you know. And she worried about him because he was getting worse and getting sicker all the time. And he would still go out to work.
Dermie's father died at the age of 54 from his health problems, which were exacerbated by the poor living conditions.
Sort of when my father died, he was a friend with Dr. Abernethy, and Dr. Abernethy was in charge of the apprentice boys. He was also medical officer of health and had a big say in housing. And when he arrived at home, my mother made him the usual mannerly cup of tea and sat down and talked, and he had a great view of my father. He said Jimmy was a great man with animals. I couldn't say enough of good things about my dad, but I remember when he was leaving, he said to my mother, "I'll get you a house now, Mrs. McClenaghan." And I remember her saying, "Sure, it's too late now, Dr. Jimmy's dead." That had a profound effect on me, you know. I just thought it was so unfair because I knew my father did nobody any harm, and I knew that the house was killing him, and I knew that it was wrong. I just knew that this man died and shouldn't have died. I just felt so angry, and I felt so sad, and I felt so sad for my mother, who was full of dignity that day at the door, you know. But nevertheless made her point in her own lovely way. It's too late now, Dr. Jimmy's dead, you know. It's a very absolute thing to say. It sends a very absolute message out. And that did affect me, you know, and I became very political thinking about it, you know.
Following his father's death, Dermie set out to help others escape these unlivable conditions.
That's why I joined the Labour Party, yeah. And at that time, the Derry Labour Party existed, and I would never have thought of joining any other party. I would never have thought of being joining the Nationalist Party, because I was sort of focused on because of my father and because of the conditions in which we were brought up. It seemed that politics were about the life of working people and not really about anything else. I knew that. I knew that very clearly in myself.
Joining the Derry Labour Party, Dermie met other like-minded activists. Together, they set out to help people in Derry, standing up to instigate change.
That's where I met Ivan Cooper, and that's when Eamon came back from England. You know, Willie Breslin, Cathy Harkin, Charlie Morrison. These were all very good people, you know. I mean, the likes of Charlie and Willie and Cathy, these are the people that created a consciousness about the town, you know. You know, the forerunner of the sort of civil rights movement and that. Cathy worked so hard for women in the town, for everyone, but she did so much for women who had troubles and problems. And we would go around and we would talk to people about their situation, about their housing, about their lack of employment, about their lack of facilities, about the health service, but all those things, you know. And then, you know, I got a caravan on the Bogside at one stage, and it was turned into an advice centre. People would come to the house about their problems, about their housing, and would fill in forms, etc., etc., etc. People were queuing up outside the door at times. My mother's heart was broken. She felt obliged to make people, whoever it was, a cup of tea.
Number 7 Wellington Street, the source of Dermie's motivation, became the political home for the Derry radicals.
Then, to some extent, Number 7 Wellington Street became a very political house. That house was like that, Wellington Street. And we had all sorts of meetings in it that never stopped, you know. But my mother would sort of make everybody feel welcome, although that wasn't easy for her either, you know, having people in the house all the time. The wee front room didn't belong to her anymore. It belonged to politics, belonged to the radicals in the town.
The radicals worked tirelessly to help people desperately in need of rehoming.
We were all very conscious that people were being exploited and there was lack of fair play. A lot of people thought squatting was a bad idea because it was queue jumping, but how could it be queue jumping if they weren't building houses, you know? I squatted people all the time. There was Charlie, me, Willie, and we'd have a bag of tools and they'd break in the window and to get the electricity working in the house and to sort of to make sure that we had everything sorted out for but people lived in awful conditions. Dreadful, awful conditions. We rackman landlords, you know, exploited with rent and awful conditions. It was shocking. I mean, it really was quite awful things that were happening, you know. And you know what upset me? Like, these people were having a hard time, and it wasn't reducible to their own way of thinking or their own behaviour or their own sort of remus. You know what I mean? It was forced upon them, you know, because of bad politics and because of injustice. And it just wasn't right. You can't have that amount of neglect and that amount of lack of democracy, that amount of just ignoring people's plight without something happening, without society breaking up. And you can't really have that existing to the level it did in Derry without trouble starting. And really that's the basis for the uprising that became the civil rights movement.